Have you ever stopped to think why, even knowing Jesus' teachings about fear, we still wake up in the middle of the night with our hearts racing? Why, even knowing that he said, "Fear not," we remain paralyzed in the face of life's uncertainties? The truth is that there is something about what Jesus said about fear that most people don't realize. Something so profound and revolutionary that once you understand it, it will completely change your perspective on anxiety, insecurity, and even your own faith. Today, I'll reveal Jesus' teachings on fear that have been hidden behind simple translations. I'll show you why his words weren't just gentle comfort, but a spiritual command capable of transforming your life. And in the end, you'll discover the secret Christ used to overcome fear itself at the most terrifying moment in human history. If you've been struggling with fear, if anxiety has been keeping you awake at night, or if you feel like your faith isn't strong enough to weather the storms, this video was made just for you, because what you're about to discover goes beyond memorized verses. It's about a truth that can change everything. Why is it that fear can be so loud in our minds, even when everything around us is silent? There comes a time in every person's life when fear doesn't make noise, doesn't scream, doesn't threaten openly. It's simply there, like a shadow that grows when the light dims. It's in this silence that we realize how much fear, according to the Bible, it's different from anything we imagined. How many times have you found yourself with your heart racing for no apparent reason? How many nights have your body been tired, but your mind couldn't rest? This kind of fear is the most dangerous because it has no face, no name, but it consumes our peace like an invisible fire. Jesus knew exactly what this was. He knew the weight of the silence that unsettles, of the anguish that has no logical explanation. And that's precisely why his words about fear carry an authority beyond human comprehension. But here's what few realize. When Christ spoke about fear, he wasn't giving advice. He was revealing a spiritual reality that determines whether we live as prisoners or as truly free people. And this reality is about to be revealed in a way you never imagined. It was a night like any other, but Daniel knew something was different. Let me tell you a story that happened a few years ago. Daniel was a man of faith, had attended church for over 20 years, and knew the Bible by heart. But that Tuesday, when he received the call from the doctor, all the words he had memorized seemed to evaporate from his mind. "Mr. Daniel, we need to talk about your tests. Can you come here tomorrow morning?" The doctor's voice sounded distant, as if coming from another world. When he hung up the phone, Daniel realized his hands were shaking. It wasn't just nervousness. It was something much deeper. All night long, he walked around the house, repeating verses, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." But the words came out of his mouth without reaching his heart. It was as if fear and trust in God were fighting inside him, and fear was winning. The next day, upon entering the office, Daniel realized something that changed his life forever. The doctor told him the tests were normal, but that he wanted to redo some because there was a small shadow in the image. Nothing serious, just a precaution. It was at that moment that Daniel understood what the Bible teaches about fear. It's not about being afraid or not being afraid. It's about what we do when it appears. Because even the disciples who walked with Jesus felt fear. The difference between a faith that paralyzes and a faith that liberates is not the absence of fear. It is what happens when it knocks on our door. And what Jesus taught about this will surprise you. Do you know how many times the expression "fear not" appears in the Bible? There are more than 365 times, one for each day of the year. But this is no coincidence. It is a divine project for our soul. When Jesus said, "Do not be afraid," he wasn't suggesting. It wasn't a gentle request, like when we say, "Don't worry" to a distressed friend. It was an order. A spiritual command that carries the power to transform our inner reality. Think of the most intense moments in the Gospels. When the disciples were in the boat and the storm threatened to sink them, Jesus didn't say, "Try not to be afraid, okay?" He declared with authority, "Why are you afraid? Where is your faith?" The difference is subtle, but revolutionary. Jesus' quotes about fear always carried authority because he knew something we take a while to understand. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a spiritual force that can dominate our lives or be dominated by us. When Christ said, "Fear not," he was activating something within people. It was as if he were saying, you have the power to choose which voice you will listen to, the voice of fear or the voice of faith. Jesus' message for those who are afraid was never about pretending the dangers don't exist. It was about discovering that there is a force greater than any circumstance that might threaten us. But how does this force work in practice? How does it manifest itself when we're in the middle of a storm? The answer will leave you speechless. Hold on. Before continuing, if this content resonates with you, please leave a like below. This helps me understand if I'm on the right track and motivates me to create more content like this. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel. It's quick and easy. Now, back to what really matters. There is a secret about how to overcome fear with faith that Jesus revealed, but that many people interpret superficially. Most people think that having faith simply means believing that everything will work out. But what Christ taught goes far beyond that. He showed that faith is an active force, not a passive one. It's like a spiritual muscle that needs to be exercised precisely in the most difficult moments. Remember the story of Peter walking on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he could do the impossible. But the moment he looked at the waves, at the storm, the power of faith against fear lost momentum, and he began to sink. What this teaches us is profound. Faith and fear cannot occupy the same space in our hearts at the same time. It's physically impossible. When one increases, the other diminishes. It's like light and darkness. Where there is light, there is no darkness. Overcoming fear through faith, it's not about convincing our minds that there's no danger. It's about training our hearts to trust even when there is danger. It's about deliberately choosing what we focus on, the size of the problem or the size of our God. Jesus knew that this choice would define not only our emotional well-being, but our spiritual destiny. And in the next stories I'll tell, you'll see how this works in real life. Have you ever thought about what it must have been like to be in that boat with Jesus when the storm started? Imagine the scene. They were experienced fishermen. They knew the lake like the back of their hands. But suddenly, the wind picked up, the waves began to crash into the boat, and for a moment even those men who lived by the sea felt a chill of fear run through their veins. Meanwhile, Jesus slept. It wasn't indifference, it was absolute trust. When they woke him in despair, he did something that forever changed their understanding of spiritual authority. He not only calmed the storm, but asked, "Where is your faith?" Biblical stories about courage always reveal the same pattern. God doesn't remove the storms from our lives and then give us courage. He gives us courage to face the storms. Think of David facing Goliath. He didn't pray for the giant to disappear. He picked up 5 stones and went into battle, knowing that Jesus comforts in fear through our obedience, not our escape. Or remember Esther, who risked her own life to save her people. She said, "If I perish, I perish." It wasn't a lack of fear. It was faith greater than fear. Each of these stories teaches us that facing fear with Jesus, it means taking the next step even when your legs tremble. It means obeying even when your heart races. It means trusting even when logic tells you to run. Because in the end, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is faith in action. But there is something even deeper to this issue. Something Jesus revealed about the real enemy we face. What would you do if you discovered you've been fighting the wrong enemy all along? Jesus' words on anxiety reveal something shocking to us. Most of the time, it's not the situation itself that paralyzes us, but our mental anticipation of it. It's not what's happening, but what we imagine might happen. Jesus was blunt when he said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." He wasn't being insensitive to our real problems. He was revealing that anxiety is a thief of peace that steals our present to torture us with imaginary futures. How many nights have you lost sleep worrying about something that never happened? How many decisions have you postponed because your mind created catastrophic scenarios that existed only in your imagination? Fear and Christian faith confront each other precisely in this territory, the realm of what-ifs. What if I lose my job? What if my illness worsens? What if my children stray? What if? Anxiety is cruel because it makes us suffer twice, once in our imagination and once in reality if it actually happens. Jesus knew this when he taught about fear, anxiety, and hope in Christ. He showed us that the real battle is not against circumstances, but against the thoughts we allow to dominate our minds. But there is something even deeper that Christ revealed, something about a kind of fear we don't always recognize. There is a kind of fear that is silent, subtle, but devastating. It's not fear of losing your job, getting sick, or being rejected. It's something much deeper, spiritual fear. How to deal with spiritual fear, it is one of the most important lessons Jesus taught us, but one we rarely stop to consider. This fear whispers dangerous questions. What if God doesn't love me the way I think I do? What if my faith isn't enough? What if I'm not really saved? What if He abandons me when I need Him most? Why are we afraid according to the Bible? The answer goes beyond physical threats. We are afraid because deep down we doubt God's goodness. We doubt His unconditional love. We doubt His faithfulness. Eve had direct access to the Creator, lived in paradise, and knew no pain, sickness, or death. But when the serpent planted a seed of doubt about God's intentions, spiritual fear found fertile ground. Did God really say? Does He really want what's best for you? This same spiritual fear haunts us today. It makes us question whether we can truly trust God when things get tough. It makes us doubt whether He is truly in control when everything seems to be falling apart. Jesus knew this inner fear of the human soul, and that's precisely why His promises were so specific and powerful. Because what He was about to reveal would change everything forever. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration of war against everything that steals our peace. Jesus' promises against fear. These are not psychological advice or relaxation techniques. They are spiritual decrees that alter the reality of our hearts. When Christ promises His peace, He is offering something that completely transcends our ability to comprehend or produce. The peace the world offers depends on the circumstances. If everything is fine, we have peace. If there are threats, we lose peace. But the peace Jesus offers is exactly the opposite. It grows precisely when circumstances are adverse. Bible on facing fear teaches us that we do not fight alone. If God is for us, who can be against us? Is not cheap optimism. It's spiritual mathematics. If the Creator of the universe is on our side, what force in heaven, earth, or hell can prevail against us? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. David didn't say he wouldn't go through the valley. He said he wouldn't fear it, because he wasn't alone. Every promise Jesus makes against fear comes with a guarantee, His presence. Not the promise that problems won't come, but the assurance that when they do, we won't face them alone. And it was precisely this certainty that sustained Jesus Himself in the most terrible moment in human history. If Jesus was God, why did He sweat blood in Gethsemane? This is one of the most profound questions about how Jesus overcame fear. If He knew He would rise again, if He had all the power in the universe, why that agony? Why that intense inner struggle? The answer changes everything, because He chose to carry not only our sins, but also our fears. On the cross, Christ experienced absolute abandonment, total loneliness, the deepest fear a human being can feel. separation from God. My God, why have you forsaken me?" It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was the real cry of someone who was going through the darkest valley possible so that we would never have to go through it alone. How does faith eliminate fear? Through the cross. Because there Jesus proved that there is no situation so desperate that God's love cannot reach. There is no fear so deep that His grace cannot heal. There is no valley so dark that His light cannot illuminate. When Christ rose again, He not only conquered death, He conquered everything that makes us fear death: loneliness, abandonment, hopelessness, the feeling of being unloved or worthless. 3 days later, when He appeared to the disciples, His first words were, "Peace be with you." It wasn't a greeting, it was a decree. It was a declaration that the reign of fear was gone forever. And this victory wasn't just for Him. It was for every person who chooses to trust this truth. If He won, so can you. This isn't cheap motivation or empty positivity. It's the most powerful spiritual reality there is. Jesus' teachings on fear culminate in this transformative truth: the battle has already been won. What remains is for us to live as victors. This doesn't mean we'll never feel fear again. It means we no longer need to be controlled by it. It doesn't mean problems will disappear. It means we have supernatural resources to face them. Facing fear with Jesus, it's about making the daily choice to trust what He has said about who we are and who He is. It's about remembering, especially in the darkest moments, that we are children of the King of the universe, that we are loved unconditionally, that our story doesn't end with the hardship we're facing. Every time you feel fear knocking on the door of your heart, remember, Jesus has been in the darkest place possible and emerged victorious. He knows your fear, understands your struggle, and is reaching out to walk with you. The question isn't whether you'll face storms in life. The question is, when they come, which voice will you choose to believe? The voice of fear that says, "You can't do it," or the voice of the one who said, "In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." Because in the end, fear doesn't define your life, faith does. And Christ has already done everything necessary for you to live as someone truly free. If you've made it this far, it means God is speaking to your heart about something important. Bible verses about fear. They are not just letters on paper. They are living promises that can transform your inner reality today. I want you to reflect. What fear has been stealing your peace lately? What area of your life needs to hear these truths we've just explored? Because Jesus didn't speak about fear just to inform us, but to transform us. Leave a comment below. What part of this video touched your heart the most? What lesson will you take with you? Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this content resonated with you, share it with someone who also needs a reminder that they're not alone on this journey. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you'll continue to find more fear and Christian faith being worked on in a deep and biblical way. Always remember, you are a child of the God who calms storms. You are loved by the Christ who conquered death. You carry within you the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead. Fear may be real, but Christ's victory is much more real, and that victory is already yours. May the peace of the Lord, which surpasses all understanding, guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Until the next video, and remember, you don't walk alone.